Um, a new survey of extremism, polarization, and alienation is dark, but it's not surprising. Americans really fucking hate each other. Now, America in the age of Trump and ascendant fascism is a political volcano. Specifically, America in this moment is a type of gray volcano. Um, there was a documentary that was released called Fire of Love. These are the real killers. They are full of unpredictable primal ferocity because of the pressures created when tectonic plates collided. The gases built up, eventually causing a massive explosion. Now, January 6th and Trump's coup attempt and the attack on the Capitol by his sycophants was one such eruption. There will, in all probability, soon be larger ones. The University of Chicago's Institute of Politics, also known as the IOP, had surveyed 1,000 registered voters between the month of May, going from May 19th to May 23rd. Its findings are another alarm about America's worsening democracy crisis. It was summarized in a new report called Our Precarious Democracy, Extreme Polarization and Alienation in Our Politics, and here is what some of it concluded. A majority of Americans agree that the government is corrupt and rigged against everyday people. In the aggregate, two-thirds of independent and Repug voters believe that the government is rigged and corrupt against people like them, while Democrats are evenly split on the question. A majority of respondents report that they are generally that they generally trust the country's elections, and that they're being conducted fairly and counted accurately. The partisan divides are extreme. Approximately 80% of Democrats hold these beliefs, while only a third or so of the Republicans believe that the country's elections are fair and trustworthy. That number is even lower for Trump sycophants. Now, the IOP's findings are especially troubling for what they suggest about the legitimacy of the country's governing institutions and democracy, and about the growing possibility of widespread political violence and other unrest. Nearly half of Americans, 49%, agree that they feel more and more like a stranger in their own country, with 69% of strong repugs and 65% who call themselves very conservative leading the way. Now, fully 38% of the strong Democrats agree. About three-quarters, 73% of voters who identify themselves as repug agree that Democrats are generally bullies who want to impose their political beliefs on those who disagree. Technically, that's Republicans doing that. An almost identical percentage of Democrats, 74%, expressed that same view of Republicans. And similarly, lopsided majority of each party holds that members of the other are generally untruthful and pushing disinformation, meaning Republicans. As seen on January 6, 2021, with Donald Trump's coup attempt and the attack on the Capitol by his sycophantic inbreds, America's democracy crisis is also being accelerated by Republican fascists and larger conservative movement that embraces political violence as a way of abandoning its revolutionary goals. On this, that the IOP warns, 28% of voters, including 37%, who have guns in their home, agree that it may be necessary at some point soon for citizens to take up arms against the government. That view is being held by 1 in 3 Republicans, which is 45% of the self-identified strong repugs. Roughly 1 in 3, 35% independent voters, and 1 in 5 Democrats agreed to do the same. These findings complement other social science research and polling, which has repeatedly shown that a plurality, if not a majority, of repugs and Trump sycophants specifically are prepared to support or condone political violence against Democrats, the Biden administration, and other enemies in order to protect what they understand as America's traditional values. Experts in internal relations, terrorism, law enforcement, and related fields have also quantified the level of risk that one country faces from an increasingly radicalized and violent repug fascist movement. Some estimates suggested that tens of millions of Americans would take up arms against the country's multiracial democracy, no doubt describing their actions as patriotic or fighting back against the deep state. It's not patriotic, it's fake patriotism. If commanded to by Donald Trump or other right-wing leaders and violent entrepreneurs. Now, political scientists Nathan Kalmo and Liliana Mason told Salam, this embrace of violence by the repug fascists reflects a larger trend in American society. They found steadily rising levels of support for partisan violence from the first survey that they conducted back in 2017 through their last one back in February of 2021. Our vilifying questions for partisan moral disengagement also steadily rose over that time. Support for threats against leaders and citizens were a little more variable, rising at times of the greatest contention and then dropping afterwards. Those results tell us that even with our current contentious period, those radical views are becoming more prevalent. The trends in our survey, work generally comports with rising levels of threats against leaders. For example, the Los Angeles Times cataloged steadily rising threats against Congress in 2016, when they numbered just under 1,000, to 2021, when they nearly reached 10,000, an order of magnitude more in just 4 years. The most lucid insights into the political and social dynamics of a given society, especially one in the midst of a democracy crisis, come from a combination of quantitative and qualitative research. These types of descriptions help to create a more comprehensive narrative and picture of the public mood by highlighting both the big picture and also the more granular details of how individuals and groups are experiencing this moment of great change and disruption. Journalistic accounts and other types of reporting can be especially important aspects of this truth-telling project, helping to make complex social dynamics and questions of power more legible. A recent article at the Washington Post details how Republicans are increasingly obsessed with or compelled towards a second American Civil War and other forms of violence. Here's a Republican candidate from Maryland Attorney General. Days before Maryland's July 19th primary, Michael Perucco stood up at an Italian restaurant in Rockville, and he imagined how a foreign enemy might attack America. We would expect them to make our borders porous, Perucco told the crowd, which had come to hear the Repugs running for state attorney general. We would expect them to make our cities unsafe places to live. We would expect them to try to ruin our economy. And the country was at war, he explained, and the enemy has co-opted members and agencies and agents of our government. On Tuesday, Perucco easily dispatched a more moderate Repug to win the nomination. Delaware, the state Del, Dan Cox, who won Donald Trump's endorsement after supporting the former squatter's effort to subvert the 2020 election. He also dispatched a Repug endorsed for the state's popular governor, Larry Hogan. Both candidates described a country that was not merely in trouble, but being destroyed by leaders who despised most Americans, effectively part of a civil war in both swing states and safe seats. Now, many Repugs say that the Democrats hate them personally, and that's the reason why the Democrats hate Repugs, is that the Repugs haven't accomplished anything in 40 years. Hate them personally, and they may turn rioters or police state on people who disobey them. Now, this article describes a new political ad from Catholic Vote. Basically, a conservative group spending $3 million this month to target vulnerable Democratic members of the House, which focuses on an alleged assassination plot against the rapist Brett Kavanaugh. Radical Democrats are behaving like terrorists, calling for a summer of rage. That's technically not what the Democrats do, that's Republicans, says the ad's narrator. An assassination attempt on a Supreme Court justice, domestic terrorists calling it open season. J.D. Vance, the best-selling author and Repug nominee for U.S. Senate in Ohio, has argued that the rise in fentanyl deaths looks like an intentional result of the Biden administration's border policies. Technically, he doesn't have any open border policies, a way for an unpopular president to punish the people who didn't vote for him. That's technically what Trump would do. Such reporting is essential, but should be approached with great caution, because those kinds of narrative frameworks prey to the journalistic cliches of balance and fairness, risk normalizing fascism and other forms of right-wing extremism. The same Washington Post article offers this comparison. This rhetoric is bracing, if not entirely new. Democratic commentators made democratic use of the word fascism to describe Trump's squadancy. The baseless theory that President Barack Obama was undermining American power as a foreign agent was popular with some Republicans, including Trump, who succeeded Obama in the White House. Technically, Trump didn't succeed, he was installed. Many Democrats saw the backlash to Obama as specific to his race, and they saw Biden as unlikely to inspire mass opposition to Trump in the presidential election. But many Repugs also portray Biden as a malevolent figure, a vessel for a hateful Democratic campaign to weaken America. Technically, that's what Trump did. The facts are that Trump, the current Repug Party, and the larger movement meet the most common definition of fascism: birtherism and other right-wing conspiracy theories that Barack Obama was a foreign agent, not white, and therefore a type of usurper, and they are manifestations of white supremacy and white racial paranoia. Now, political scientists and other experts have repeatedly shown that the backlash against Obama was a function of white racism and the racial resentment. Such values and beliefs disproportionately shaped support for Donald Trump and the current repug fascist movement. Now, Joe Biden is not by any reasonable criteria waging a hateful Democratic campaign to weaken America. Across many decades of public service, Biden has shown himself to be an agent of a moderate uniter, despite that's desperate for compromise and bipartisanship, who has supported many of the Repug Party's policies and positions, and frequently says that some of its leaders are his friends. Now, allowing for those shortcomings, the New Washington Post article remains important because it highlights how the Repugs and members of the larger white right actually believe that they are morally righteous the righteous victims who are justified if they turn to violence, which nothing that they do is justified anyway. But this dynamic is frequently seen in societies descending into political turmoil. Now here, David Kilcullen, an expert on counterinsurgency and military strategy, from a conversation that was back in 2020, said this: if the United States wants to avoid where it looks like it's all heading toward, but going on with the political violence, there needs to be reconciliation, and there needs to be compromise. As I see it, the problem is that the media environment is so polarized, which includes social media, and the situation is like a non-overlapping Venn diagram. People on the right are looking at a completely different reality than the people who are on the Democratic side. There is very little overlap to the point where basic facts are not in agreement. The right wing and the left wing in America disagree on the nature of reality. It's an echo chamber that has replaced consensus knowledge of the world. Many of the right-wing militias have only 5 or 10 members. They are very small, and they are also very defensive-minded, but they're also very ill-informed. Likewise, on the Democratic side, much has been made of redneck revolt and the John Brown gun clubs. They are too defensive and are trying to protect people on the streets from the possibility of violence. Now, that does not mean that they're not violent. Analysts often look for hate as the key driver of violence. The research on civil war and our experiences with counterinsurgency and guerrilla warfare generally shows that most of the worst atrocities are not driven by hate. They're instead driven by fear. Obviously, that fear can be a much bigger problem when there is a spark that triggers violence. And then there are the insurgents. They're at the top of the threat pyramid. We have not really seen any of that type of action in the United States, but that is why the country at present is a pre-insurgency or incipient state of insurgency. The American people know something is wrong with the American people know something is wrong with their country and society, and there is an abundance of empirical evidence to show that this is clear. In uncertain terms, that American democracy and the larger society face an existential challenge and worsening threat from today's Republican Party and larger conservative movement. Now, fascism and the right-wing political violence are not on the horizon or approaching, as too many among the mainstream news media continue to suggest. They are here now, and they will only get worse, framing those facts as if they are unanswered questions, and it enables the Republican fascist movement, and the pro-democracy Americans must move from a position of reaction, passivity, and denial to a proactive posture, and they go on the offense in the war to serve America's future and their own. So if you like the video, you can give the video a like and subscribe to my channel, RBW King. You can also hit the notification bell so that you'll be notified when a new video comes out. And if you want to support my work even further, you can donate to my Patreon link, which you can find on the About section of YouTube, and for just as little as a few bucks a month, your donation can help go a long way, and thanks for listening.